Hello everybody, welcome back to Kanga TV, home of North Melbourne fans, and welcome to the final installment of the 2025 player ratings and reviews here on the channel. Part 1 and 2 already alive, so I'd recommend watching those ones first before diving into the final video. 39 players played for North Melbourne in season 2025. We're going to speak about all of them here on the channel. I have not given a numerical or alphabetical rating for any of these players. I think these things are so subjective. What I might think as a B, you guys might perceive as an A or a C for the exact same season. So I'm going to give you my thoughts. You guys are going to give me yours and a rating, if you will, down in the comments below. Thank you so much to everyone who's already watched the first 2 videos up on this series on the channel. Let's not waste any more time and dive into the final batch of players. Starting strong with defender Charlie Comben, and I think Charlie's season was quite underrated. I think he clearly had a career best year last year, burst onto the scene with that move in defense. He had been a solid player for us for the couple of seasons prior, but couldn't find any consistency in his body, had battled through some injury issues, which have continued over the past couple of seasons, but he looks to really trust himself down back. He's announced himself as one of the best intercepting defenders in the competition. I think his one-on-one work this season has drastically improved as well. I don't know if that's because of the improvement of the system overall. Maybe it's just a slight change in role and responsibility. Maybe it's after having a year down back. He maybe is a bit more confident in his defensive abilities, but he's got a great set of hands. He's got a really, really great sense of where the ball is going to go and way to read the play. I think for him, he started the season off slowly. He had a couple of injury niggles early on, and I know he missed a few games in the middle of the year as well, thanks to that cracked shoulder, but for the most part he's held up really, really well, and I think it was frustrating to see him go forward for a couple of weeks there. I understand trying something because it just wasn't working for us, and I applaud Clarko for doing it. I applauded him at the time, but it's so obvious that his best position is down back. I think that's where he needs to stay now, especially because he was one of only 2 solid defenders, in my opinion, key defenders anyway, down back for the duration of the season. The other one was Toby Pink. Toby Pink delisted at the end of 2024 with the promise of being rookied in 25. Wasn't quite sure where he would fit into the side this year. He played down back a little bit in 24, up forward in 24 as well. He kind of just filled holes structurally that we needed. But wow, hasn't he had a great season? He's been another massive improver for us, I think. And I spoke to Chloe about this. That video is live on the channel as well. She said that when he is allowed the opportunity to settle in an environment and just come out of his shell, that's when he starts to play his best footy on field as well. And that was definitely the case this year. He was unfairly dropped earlier in the year when Griffin Logue initially returned from injury. So for him to come back into the side and to hold his spot, I think was really important, not just for him, but for this backline as a whole. He and Charlie Comben played down there for majority of the second half of the year together, and they were a great 1-2 punch. They really fed well off each other. Unfortunately for Toby, he was comprehensively beaten by Tom Lynch early in that second Tigers game. But outside of that performance, I would say that he really held his own very, very well for the entirety of the season, earned himself another contract for 26, and looks like he'll be a really important part of that backline once again. Unfortunately, not much can be said for Jackson Archer. We missed his presence in our backline for majority of the year, a 3-week suspension early on, and then a hamstring injury that followed just a few weeks later saw him ruled out for the rest of the season. It was a shame. He was so important for us in the back end of last year, and I really thought that he would continue that form into 2025. Not only did we miss him, we were just unable to replace him with anyone remotely similar. We had quite a few players that were trialled in that back pocket position. It was either in the VFL or at AFL level. We did try and replace it with more attacking defenders, and while Riley Hardiman was great for us in 2025, I still think that we missed that lockdown defender role. We were having 4 tall defenders play at various stages as well. We just couldn't find the balance right. So I think it speaks volumes not only to his importance as an individual, but that role as a whole, and if that's something we look to bring bring in during the off season, and dare I say it, is a hole that we will try and fill, but hopefully we can do that successfully with Arch, with his body right and ready to go for next year. Matt Whitlock, another debutant. We took him in the 2024 draft as well, controversially with that Richmond pick swap that came live in the draft action. I liked what I saw from Matt Whitlock. He played one game in defence and one game up forward. He was very, very raw, but I just liked his energy and his enthusiasm. I still think his best position is up for debate. I really liked what he added against the Swans when he played in his debut game in defence. I felt like he struggled to get going up forward against Richmond. I know he started as the sub, but he did come on early in the second quarter for an injured Cam Zurhaar and just sort of failed to get himself involved in a game that the ball spent a lot of time in our forward half, particularly in that second half. So I just feel like it's good experience and good exposure for a young kid, but I do hope that we can see more from him at senior level next year. I know that part of that is him having to earn his spot, and I just hope the opportunity comes up because I do think there's some good talent to work with, and I think it's important for us. We obviously lack long-term prospects both forward and down back, just given the age profile of some of our key position players at either end of the ground. So to get him in 12 months earlier, to get some size on him, get him in the gym, get him in the AFL environment, then hopefully we can see him go bigger and better in 26. An interesting year for Cooper Harvey, probably only on the list because of the retirement of Jaden Stevenson. I really liked Cooper's game against Melbourne and then the following week against Sydney, and then he was out of the side with illness. He didn't look the same when he came back into the side. If I'm honest, I feel like those two games are probably a sample size of his best footy and his most dangerous footy up forward. Probably doesn't offer enough for me beyond good goal sense. He doesn't run the other way whatsoever. I don't think he's got a defensive bone in his body. And I did say this in a previous part of this series. I really like Cooper Harvey, but I think one issue for our football club at the moment and a lot of these best 23 players is they're just not enough complete players. There's very few players that really can do it all. If Cooper Harvey's attacking nature and Jacob Konstanty's defensive nature could combine for one player, that would be like a dream small forward for us, because I think both of those guys are very good at one, but just not the other. I think he'll get another contract next year. He's out of contract at the moment. I think he'll get a year. I wouldn't give him more than a year at this stage. I still think he has some work to do, and I do think right now he is a feature in our best 23, but I do think that either he's got to improve or he'll be replaceable, because like I said, he's an almost player for me, and I do like that he can hit the scoreboard, but he's not pulling out those Melbourne performances on a weekly basis, and we do need then a defensive element to him if he's not going to hit the scoreboard consistently the same way like a Zurhaar or a Curtis do. So enjoyed his year, thought he had a couple of very good games, probably could have come into the side sooner than he did, and maybe that was why we didn't see as much of his brilliant best as we might have liked. Think there's a spot for him next year, but I personally think he's got a bit of work to do on his work rate and his work ethic, especially defensively. If you had told me at the start of last season that Tristan Xerri would probably be our best player, I never would have believed you. However, we're sitting here and we're sitting at the end of Tristan Xerri's second unbelievable season. Not only was 2024 great, but what makes 2025 better in my mind is the fact that he was able to back up what he promised and what he showed in his breakout year last year. Unbelievable player, not just in the ruck, but his clearance work, his tackling work, his work rate is unbelievable, and he has become a complete player. He just does it at all ends of the ground. He should be winning our best and fairest this year. He probably should have got a look in for the All-Australian squad at the very least. You wonder how much of that suspension would have impacted his chances there. The one thing for Tristan Xerri, we went to Adelaide in round 3. It looks like he injured his hamstring. It wasn't enough to sideline him, but he didn't look the same until we went back to Adelaide a few weeks later to play Port Adelaide, and he just looked back to his best from then on, didn't really skip a beat. Not much more I can say about X, but that helmet has just completely transformed him, and I couldn't be happier that I was proven wrong on him and that he has turned out to be the player for us that he has been. Finally got to see a debut from fan favourite cult hero Finnbarr Maley. Found Finnbarr's season quite difficult to judge as well. I thought he showed some great signs in the patch in the first half of the season when he replaced Paul Curtis. So Paul Curtis was suspended for 3 games. Finnbarr came in. He was awesome on debut against Essendon and then backed it up for the couple of weeks that followed. He did make a reappearance in the second half of the year, and he failed to impact the side in the same way and probably was a little bit underwhelming for mine. He wasn't really getting too involved in the play. He wasn't marking it a lot. He wasn't having a lot of shots on goal. His marking is definitely his strength and his vertical leap. Now, in the first half of the year, especially in the patch where he did come into the side, we were a lot more competitive in games, and we looked to be really on the attack quite strong, whereas in the second half the ball and the supply maybe wasn't as much moving forward, but even then he sort of failed to have an impact around the ground, even presenting higher up the ground to be an option for our midfielders to sort of go out to, or our defenders to go out to move the ball forward. So he's out of contract at the end of the year, I believe. I don't know what's going to happen with him at this stage. I think there's still a few question marks for me. We know what he can be. His kicking and his general awareness probably isn't quite where we need it to be. I think the shot clock incident against Essendon is probably a good example of that. However, his marking is great. His marking ability is great. And he isn't too bad in front of goal. So it just depends on how the club feels at this stage of his development, and if they feel like he's worth persisting with, if they think they can get the best footy out of him, and if he can turn into the player that we need him to be. Jacob Konstanty was definitely a surprise packet for me in 2025, simply because I didn't think he would have as much game time as he did. He played every single game in season 2025, and I thought he started the season really, really well. He was getting involved in front of goal. He was adding a really nice defensive support for Paul Curtis up forward as well. But I feel like as the year went on, his form started to falter a little bit. The defensive pressure was always there, and that work rate was always at the forefront of his game, but I just feel like he probably failed to back it up with the goals. And that's sort of what I was saying about Cooper Harvey before. If he had the work rate that Konstanty has, the second, the third attempts, the pressure acts, the tackling, great. Like, that would just be the dream player for us. But Konstanty, I think, needs to find a way to get himself in more positions where he can kick more goals, to be honest. I think next year will be a really telling year for him. I don't think that this guy is necessarily a lock in this side moving forward at the moment. I think that small forward position is still very much up for grabs, and I think that with the exception of Geordie Payne, it seems like almost everyone else will probably get a contract at this stage. I believe Banch has a 1-year deal potentially sitting in front of him. You would suspect that Harvey would get another year, and Konstanty triggered a year extension during the season. Maybe Geordie Payne will get one as well, and whether they go to the draft or go to the trade looking for another small forward option as well. I just don't know if it's going to be enough long term what he's offering. For now, it's fine, but I think we need more players who can get themselves involved in multiple facets of the game from a week-to-week basis. For Cal Dawson and Bryn Teakle, unfortunately their time at North Melbourne has now come to an end. Both of them probably failed to make the most of the opportunities that were in front of them, maybe in different ways. Cal Dawson in particular, I thought, had a couple of big opportunities to lock a spot in that backline. Our key defensive stocks, between the injuries and between the lack of form for a number of players, he actually did have a real opportunity to lock a spot in there, and he just couldn't do it. He didn't look up to it in the couple of games games that he played this season. Teakle, I just think he is what he is, and he served a purpose that we had last year in particular. Coming in, played every game after the mid-season draft last year. We so desperately just needed someone to support Larky up forward. He could give Xerri a tap out in the ruck. He was a really reliable target up forward, but this year we've improved in all of those areas, and Teakle, while he was good when Xerri was suspended for a few weeks, that's kind of all it was, and that's all he ever will be. So I don't begrudge the club for making that decision, and I wish both of them all the best in whatever lies ahead. You guys know how hot I've been on Cam Zurhaar's season, and I think he was one of our best players in season 2025. His career best year in front of goal, his most consistent year, and he was just unreal. I think finally getting a bit of support up forward for Larky meant that Bull didn't have to play tall. He could play that traditional third tall mid role, and he did it to a T. The thing with Cam Zurhaar is he does have game breaking abilities, and quite a few times this season he just needed a quarter to turn the game on its head. Absolutely loved the year that he had. Would love to see more explosiveness. I'd also love to see a little bit more chaos in him through the middle of the ground, just for 5 to 10 minutes, potentially in a quarter or across a game even. It doesn't have to be a lot, especially if the ball isn't going forward enough. I think having him involved as much as possible, along with Paul Curtis as well, is going to be key for us. I think next year, on the other hand, he is so dangerous up forward. He can create something out of nothing. He is one of those guys. He really can be the match winner when we need him to be. So I loved the year from him, and I just can't wait to see him do it all again next year. Zach Banch, taken with our first pick in the 2025 mid-season draft. Enjoyed what he brought to the table. Loved his fearlessness, and he is just someone who is incredibly resilient. I think that mark against St Kilda, where he ended up breaking his ribs, I'm pretty sure, which I thought would keep him out for the year, but he did come back and make a final appearance in round 24. Not only was nominated for Mark of the Year finalist, but it just shows the commitment to the contest, and that's the kind of guy that you want wearing the jumper, someone whose effort and intent is always there and you never have to question it. Don't know what next year will bring for him in terms of opportunity. As I mentioned before, I believe there's a 1-year deal on the table for him, so it's whether or not that is true, and if we hear official wording from the club in the weeks to come. But I would like to see him get another opportunity next year. I think he can be the goal sneak we need him to be. His form in the VFL in the first half of the year was epic, and he definitely deserved the selection in the mid-season draft. So hopefully he can find a little bit more of that and bring it to North Melbourne next year. Robert Hansen Jr., I think, is another player that divides a lot of the supporter base. I think the snippets that we have seen from him, I get so excited every time he is around the ball. I love him in that higher half-forward role. He can be quite instrumental and influential when kicking the ball inside our forward 50 as well is a beautiful kick of the footy. Probably just doesn't see enough of it for me at the moment. He signed a 2-year contract extension. I'm not quite sure I saw enough from him to warrant that much faith. I think he's a really good sub, but I'm not sure. I think there's potential there for him to be a player for us. But again, are we giving players contract, and are we giving them games based on what we think they can be and what they should be, or the reality of them and the reality of what they bring to this side on a week-to-week basis? I'm definitely going to keep my eye out on that one next year. We know that contracts mean almost nothing in this day and age, and it's not to suggest that I want him pushed out the door by any means. You want to back him in, and if the coaching staff and if the guys making the decisions think that there's a spot for him in the future, then fabulous. But I'm not quite sure what that is for him at the moment. A couple of times at training in the preseason in particular, I watched him, and his work rate is unreal. He's definitely got one of the better work rates and the two-way running that we need from a lot of the other guys in the side. So hopefully we see more of that with age and potentially opportunity for him in 2026. And finally, a player who has got so many North fans excited, and it's not hard to see why Cooper Trembath came to North Melbourne with our second pick in the 2025 mid-season draft. A lot of question marks as to why we opted to take him over an Archer May, and the last 3 games of the season is your answer. He's been unreal for us. 3 goals in each of his 3 games this season. imagine what he can be with a full preseason in the gym under his belt and ready to go next year. He signed a 1-year extension at the end of the season. Very, very well deserved. More than happy for it to be just 1 year at this stage. Make sure that he can back it up and then look to extend it, halfway through next year if that's what we need to do. I love him. I think he's fabulous. He's also got such a great energy and he's a great personality to have around the club. You can see Jack Darling working really close with him next year, and then eventually JD stepping away and it being Nick Larkey and Cooper Trembath in that forward line for many years to come. I can't wait to see the two of them play together next year as well. I think they could be quite a dangerous duo if we let them, and that's enough to get North fans so optimistic about what lies ahead. There you have it, guys. That is the end of our player reviews for 2025 here on the channel. You've heard what I have to say, and now I want to hear from you. Feel free to leave all of your thoughts in the comments below. We can, of course, keep chatting over on socials as well. Kanga TV show across Instagram, Facebook, X, and on email. I look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. Go Roos.